Every morning at exactly 7:15, before the city fully woke up, Ethan Cole would stop at the same corner near the old bus station. The streets were always a mix of silence and distant noise, vendors preparing their carts, a few tired workers heading home, and the hum of a city caught between night and day. But for Ethan, that corner held a purpose far deeper than routine. Sitting on a worn-out wooden crate, wrapped in a faded grey shawl, was Mrs. Eliza. Her hair was thin and silver, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a small tin cup. Most people passed her without a glance. Some dropped coins without meeting her eyes. Others pretended she didn't exist at all. But not Ethan. "Good morning, Mrs. Eliza," he would say. Every single day, his voice warm and steady. She would look up, her tired eyes lighting up just a little. "Ah, my boy. You're early today." "I'm always early for you," he'd smile, placing a crisp $10 bill into her hand. At first, she had refused. "This is too much," she had whispered on the first day. "You don't even know me." Ethan had simply replied, "I don't need to know everything. I just know you shouldn't have to sit here alone." And so it became their ritual. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Through scorching summers and bitter winters, Ethan never missed a day. Rain didn't stop him. Illness didn't stop him. Even when he looked exhausted, like the weight of the world sat on his shoulders, he still came. Sometimes he would sit beside her for a few minutes. They talked about simple things, weather, memories, the way the world used to be. She spoke of a past filled with laughter, a home that once echoed with love, and people who were now long gone. Ethan never asked too many questions. He simply listened. And somehow, that meant everything. What Ethan never told her was that he wasn't wealthy. In fact, he was far from it. He worked 2 jobs, one as a delivery driver and another at a small warehouse. His clothes were clean but worn, his shoes slightly scuffed. Every dollar he gave her was one he could have used himself. But he never hesitated. Because to him, Mrs. Eliza wasn't a stranger. She was family. One cold morning, as the wind cut through the streets, Ethan noticed something different. Mrs. Eliza's hands were shaking more than usual. Her face looked pale, her breath shallow. "Are you all right?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She gave a faint smile. "Just a little tired today, my boy. Nothing to worry about." But Ethan wasn't convinced. "Let me take you somewhere warm," he insisted. She gently shook her head. "No, this is where I belong." Ethan clenched his jaw, frustration and helplessness mixing in his chest. "You deserve better than this." Her eyes softened as she reached out, placing her fragile hand over his. "And you deserve to know. Your kindness matters more than you think." He didn't understand what she meant. Not then. As he stood up to leave, placing the usual $10 in her hand, she held onto his fingers for just a moment longer than usual. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan smiled, unaware that this simple routine, this quiet act of kindness, was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. Because somewhere beyond the streets, beyond the struggles, a story was unfolding, one that would lead him to a place he never dreamed of, and a truth that would leave him standing still. At the most unexpected moment of his life never slowed down for Ethan. Each day blended into the next, long hours, aching muscles, and just enough rest to start all over again. Yet, no matter how exhausting things became, he held on to one constant, Mrs. Eliza. But one morning, she wasn't there. Ethan stopped at the usual corner, his eyes scanning the empty crate. His chest tightened. "Mrs. Eliza." He called softly, as if she might appear from thin air. Nothing. The next day, he came earlier. Still nothing. A week passed, and the absence became unbearable. The corner that once felt meaningful now felt hollow, like something important had been taken away without explanation. "Do you know where the old woman went?" he asked a nearby vendor. The man shrugged. "She just stopped coming. Happens all the time." But Ethan refused to accept that. He searched nearby shelters, asked around hospitals, even walked through streets he had never been to before. But there was no trace of her. Days turned into weeks. And slowly, reluctantly, Ethan began to accept that she was gone. Not long after, something unexpected happened. One evening, as Ethan returned to his small apartment, he found a neatly sealed envelope slipped under his door. It was thick, expensive looking, something that didn't belong in his world. Confused, he picked it up and opened it. Inside was a beautifully designed card, embossed with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Alexander Laron. Ethan frowned. He didn't know anyone by that name. He read further. Your presence is deeply requested. Please attend. There was no explanation. No signature beyond the name. No indication of why he had been invited. This must be a mistake, he muttered. A billionaire's wedding? It made no sense. Ethan almost threw the invitation away. But something stopped him. A strange feeling he couldn't quite explain. Maybe curiosity, maybe something deeper. Days passed, and the invitation sat on his small table, untouched but not forgotten. Finally, on the morning of the wedding, Ethan made a decision. He didn't own a suit, but he borrowed one from a friend. It didn't fit perfectly, but it was good enough. Standing in front of the mirror, he barely recognized himself. What am I even doing? He whispered. Yet, something pulled him forward. The wedding was held at a grand estate, far beyond anything Ethan had ever seen. The gates alone were larger than his entire apartment building. Luxury cars lined the entrance, and elegantly dressed guests filled the space with laughter and chatter. Ethan felt completely out of place. As he stepped inside, the grandeur overwhelmed him. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and a sense of wealth that felt almost unreal. Invitation, please, a staff member said. Ethan handed over the card, expecting to be turned away. But instead, the man nodded respectfully. Welcome, sir. Sir. No one had ever called him that before. Still unsure, Ethan moved through the crowd, his heart pounding. He didn't belong here. He didn't understand why he had been invited. And then, just as the ceremony was about to begin, something happened. A voice called out, "Stop!" The entire room fell silent. Ethan turned slowly. And there, standing at the entrance, was a figure he thought he would never see again. The grand hall fell into a stunned silence, the kind that presses against your ears and makes your heartbeat sound louder than it should. Every head turned toward the entrance. Even the groom, Alexander Laron, the billionaire whose name alone commanded respect, paused mid-step, confusion flickering across his face. But Ethan didn't see any of that. His world had narrowed down to one person, standing at the doorway, dressed not in rags but in an elegant ivory gown, her silver hair neatly styled, her posture dignified and strong, was Mrs. Eliza. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His mind struggled to make sense of what he was seeing. This wasn't possible. The fragile woman who sat on a wooden crate every morning, the one who clutched a tin cup with trembling hands. She stood now like royalty. Mrs. Eliza. He whispered, barely audible. Her eyes found his instantly. And she smiled. Not the tired, faint smile he had grown used to, but a full, radiant one, filled with warmth and something deeper, pride. Wait, Ethan said, taking a step forward. What is this? The crowd began to murmur. Guests exchanged puzzled glances. Security hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. But Alexander Laron raised a hand, signaling them to stand down. Let her speak, he said calmly, though his voice carried a hint of curiosity. Mrs. Eliza stepped forward, her presence commanding attention in a way that felt almost surreal. I'm sorry for the interruption, she began, her voice clear and steady. But there's something that must be done before this ceremony continues. Ethan stood frozen, his heart racing. What's going on? He asked again, louder this time. She walked toward him slowly, her gaze never leaving his. Ethan, she said softly. Hearing his name from her lips in this place, in this moment, felt unreal. I owe you the truth. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice never wavered. My name is not just Eliza, she began. I am Eliza Laron, Alexander's grandmother. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ethan felt the ground beneath him shift. No, that can't be, he said, shaking his head. You were on the streets. She finished gently. He nodded, unable to speak. Yes, she said. But not because I had nowhere to go. Because I chose to be there. Silence fell again, heavier this time. For years, she continued, I watched the world from a place most people never look twice at. I saw how people treat those they think of nothing. I saw the cruelty, the indifference. Her gaze softened as she looked at Ethan. And then I met you. Ethan's chest tightened. You didn't just give me money, she said. You gave me respect. You gave me time. You gave me kindness when you had so little yourself. Tears began to roll down Ethan's face. I didn't know. He whispered. That's what makes it real, she replied. You had no reason to help me. No expectation of reward. And yet, you showed up every single day. She reached into her purse and pulled out something familiar. A small, worn tin cup. I kept this, she said, as a reminder of what truly matters. Turning to the crowd, she raised her voice slightly. In a world obsessed with wealth, power, and status, this young man showed more humanity than most people I've ever known. Alexander stepped forward, his expression now filled with understanding. Grandmother, he said softly. She placed a hand on his shoulder. And that is why, she continued, before you begin this new chapter of your life, I wanted everyone here to witness what true wealth looks like. She turned back to Ethan. It looks like him. Ethan stood there, overwhelmed, his emotions spilling over in a way he couldn't control. The room, filled with the richest and most powerful people, now looked at him with something he had never experienced before. Respect. I don't know what to say, he managed. Mrs. Eliza smiled. You don't have to say anything, my boy. She stepped closer and gently took his hands in hers. For months, you gave me $10 every day, she said. Do you know how much that meant? Ethan shook his head. It wasn't the money, she said. It was the heart behind it. She turned to Alexander once more. As my grandson begins his life with his bride, I want him to remember this lesson. That kindness, no matter how small, has the power to change lives. Alexander nodded, visibly moved. Then, to Ethan's complete surprise, Mrs. Eliza did something no one expected. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a document, a job offer, a home, a future. But Ethan looked up, his eyes filled with tears, and said something that made her smile even more. I didn't do it for this. I know, she replied softly. That's why you deserve it. And in that moment, surrounded by luxury and grandeur, something far more powerful took center stage. A simple act of kindness had come full circle, and Ethan's life would never be the same again.